How safe are our skies? If a foreign adversary were to enter our airspace without authorization, who would stop them? The Air Force, right? Ours is one of the oldest in the world, but is it still fit for purpose? Well, the good news is we have over 300 aircraft. The bad, only 6 are in working order. 6 planes to watch over 1,221,037 square kilometers rather. That is our geographic size, to say nothing of our coast and our waters. Might this be the reason our dead and wounded soldiers were repatriated following a humiliating march via Uganda after being overrun by the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels in the eastern DRC? Not only could we not provide air support during the fight, we couldn't even pull them out when the fight was lost. I've got two gentlemen joining me this morning. Firstly, we invited Helmoed Heitman, who's a military and defense expert, but also the person keeping an eye on all of this. Dakota Legoete is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee for Defense and Military Veterans. Helmoed Heitman, I'll give you the first word on this. Our Air Force, once a source of pride, is now crippled by maintenance failures, budget cuts, and neglect. How bad is it?
Pretty bad. The numbers in the article, to be fair, were a little out of date. It's not quite that bad at the moment. But the reality is that the Air Force is not functional at the moment. It's got far too few aircraft to do the job. And it goes beyond that. It doesn't have some of the right weapons. There are no standoff weapons for the Gripens, no anti-radar weapons, no precision weapons for the Roy Clark attack helicopter, and so on. The problem is, you touched on it, budget is part of it. The money is just too little. The other part is that quite a lot of the missions, and Treasury has confirmed this, a lot of the missions government tosses to the Defence Force are never funded. So it's got to find the money for those somewhere in its already inadequate budget. And then the personnel costs eat up a lot of the budget. And it doesn't help to say we've got to cut, because in fact the Army specifically is probably arguably short about 10,000 people to do what it's supposed to be doing. What has happened is the missions have grown, the funding hasn't. So things like personnel costs and day-to-day stuff eat up things. And then there were some problems at the Arms Corps side also arranging the maintenance contracts and the implosion of Denel after the state capture situation there. So it's been a mixed bag of things. So it's not just the Air Force, then the Navy is in the same boat, and the Army's heavy equipment is in the same situation.
So give us an overview then of the current operational status of our Air Force and what that might mean for our capacity to defend ourselves.
Oh, well, strictly speaking, if Botswana wanted to overrun us, they could. They're better equipped at the moment. The good news is, of course, that Botswana as a country and the Botswana Defence Force is too small to take over all of South Africa. They couldn't, even if they wanted to. And we don't have any immediate enemies right next door to us. What it does mean, though, is we were unable to do anything serious about the insurgency in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, which sooner or later is going to impact us, because if it spreads, it's going to affect Cahora Bassa. It's going to affect the southern gas fields, and in any event, in the long run, we're going to need the northern gas fields. It's meant, for instance, that we couldn't deploy very quickly into the Congo, and a key part of that sort of operation is to deploy very quickly with a strong force. We went, the initial force design was too small, 5,000 troops was ludicrous, and in fact only about not even half of that deployed. And of course, once there was no air support. So it means while nobody's likely to attack us, we can't actually do the stuff that we're supposed to be doing. Wind it right down to the detail. The Army currently does not have enough personnel or funding to deploy the full 22 companies it believes necessary to cover the border. There are only 15 deployed. And so it goes on. So the bottom line is the Defence Force, through no fault of the people in the Defence Force, is currently dysfunctional.
Can this be reversed, or are glory days over?
It can be reversed, but it's going to take time and money. The situation is not entirely different to what it was, say, in the late 1960s, because the previous government, once South Africa left the Commonwealth, decided, okay, they'll never go to war for Britain again, so we don't need the conventional stuff. They got rid of a lot of things. And by the time they woke up was sort of late 1960s, 1970, they then started a re-equipment program that would have been finished in 1995, i.e. 25 years later, if the funding hadn't run out in 89. So you're looking at now, I would say, at least 10 years before we can have a real grip on airspace, waters,
What is being done? Because, I mean, I remember hearing from the former defense minister, Thandi Modise, was it 3 years ago, about the number of planes that were grounded, awaiting repairs and had been idle for years. And here we are all these years later, and not much better, I'm afraid.
Good morning to you, sir, and good morning to all the listeners of the 702. Indeed, it is true. The matter was raised by Mr. Kobus Mare, who was the DA member making a parliamentary inquiry to Honorable Minister Thandi Modise in October 2023, when there was a question about the serviceability, the capacity of our Air Force in terms of the 330 aircrafts we own, which was before Parliament. At the time, we had serious problems in terms of the capacity of our planes, but so far there's a slight improvement. Even though the challenge would still be there, we must acknowledge that we do have those particular challenges as the National Defence Force, as the Portfolio Committee this week. The whole of this week we are meeting. Yesterday we met with Denel. Today we are meeting with Pretoria Metal Processing Plant, which is responsible for bullets, manufacturing of bullets, space and other related issues from Denel. We are meeting with DMV. Tomorrow we are meeting with AMSCO to check the status of all those particular contracts to ensure that we get serviceability of all our equipment, both Air Force and Navy.
All right, let me ask you, at the time, Minister Thandi Modise said 330 planes were grounded and had been lying idle awaiting repairs. You say there's been a slight improvement. How many of those 330 are now back in the air?
So that is more operational than a security question. I would not be in a position to answer it. But I can confidently say from the report we received in a closed meeting, as both the Portfolio Committee and the Joint Standing Committee of Defense, is that there is a slight improvement. What we need to do is to increase our numbers because by and large, if you recall, as a Department of Defense, we are affected.
Yes, of course. I mean, what's your response to what you heard Helmoed Heitman say there, that if we were to be attacked, we would be defenseless? We're just lucky nobody wants to.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Please give me a chance to answer you. We are ready for any possibility of any attack. It is true that we are vulnerable, as it is the case, that some of our planes are not yet operational. We have to check up our work, and that is why, as the Portfolio Committee, we are meeting with all the senior commanding officers of our military in the country. We've also
How are we vulnerable and ready at the same time?
Hello?
Hi, I'm saying, how are we vulnerable and ready at the same time?
Look, we're not depleted and completely out of relevance. That's why I'm saying we are both.
But we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves, would we?
We would be able to defend ourselves.
With what?
That's the report we have received from the Chief of the National Defence Force.
But as far as the Air Force is concerned, we wouldn't be able to defend our airspace, would we?
We will be able to defend our airspace.
With what?
I said with some of our aircraft that have been serviced.
How many?
Which are, I can't talk to numbers because that's a security question. It has to do with our capability, and that's a sensitive question.
All right, appreciate your time. Dakota Legoete there is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee for Defense and Military Veterans. Do you feel safe?
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.